Hello, printmakers. Welcome. Today I want to talk to you for a few minutes in this film about signing and numbering and what's also called editioning. An edition, now remember, is a little different than a proof. This is a group of prints that you're saying are identical, pretty much, and they would be numbered so that we know how many there are in an edition. And you would tell us maybe the title would be on it, it would be signed. Often when you purchase a print, there's sort of a certificate of authenticity, which has a little more information about it. It might say what kind of paper you used, what kind of ink, or who printed it, if the artist and the printmaker were not the same person. So I want to show you an example of the conventions of signing and numbering, and I want to talk really clearly about the fact that they are conventions. And I always feel a little bit uncomfortable talking about these because I don't want you to take them as like limitations, right? Artists are supposed to sort of push at the edge of things. We're supposed to challenge rules. That's our job in society. And so when I'm saying to you as an artist, hey, here are the rules to being a printmaker, I feel like someone's going to revoke my license. So I'm going to tell you about these conventions and these traditions in printmaking. So you're going to know what they are and you're going to decide how you feel about those, okay? Because although there are all these kind of rules about it, they are not always followed. And it doesn't mean that your print is good or bad, whether you have followed these conventions, okay? So let's take a look at the Elmo cam, and I'll show you some prints and talk about the various designations. And that's what they call it. It's a designation. Your print will have either a number or a designation that would tell the person who owned your print, someone you gave it to, someone you sold it to, a little bit about the print. Okay. And while we're here talking about the side of printmaking that is storage, conservation, record keeping, I wanted to talk about these nifty little portfolios. They're not very expensive, sort of. You can get them in different sizes. They're 14 to maybe $18 each, and you can often get them in. They used to sell them at the bookstore at Cuesta. I don't know what they're selling there now. I haven't been in, but photographers use them too because they are acid free and they keep your paper nice and flat, your prints nice and flat. And because it's acid free, if you just throw them into a cardboard box, you're liable to get what they call foxing on your paper eventually. And that's, where it turns a little bit yellow. You know how newsprint will turn very brittle and yellow? It's because it isn't buffered. It has a lot of tree acid sort of in it. I think it's called tannins. Maybe it's lignin. Anyway, tannins. And it eventually deteriorates paper. Even if your paper is acid free, if you store it with something that isn't acid free, it will deteriorate. It'll affect the quality of your paper. Okay, so you want to store your stuff in something that will keep it safer. So these are really handy. They have these nice flaps so that when you carry it, nothing falls out, but it also has these 3 ties. And you can get these at Dick Blick. And I don't know if you can get them at Michael's, but art supply stores have them. Okay, let's talk about a few prints. I brought some of mine because I want to talk about each designation that I think is worthwhile. There are some you're just never going to run into, like the Hors de Commerce. Anyway, you'll see that on the list, the HC, and that is like a sample print. Like if you were a print salesman, and I mean, we're talking about a print salesman in the 1800s, I think you might have one that you took out and you let everybody touch as a sample and let people get their dirty fingerprints on it because that was just the sample one. And so it has a different designation, right? So it's like a sample copy, okay? But you're probably not going to need that designation. Okay, so what you have is always signing as a printmaker following the conventions of printmaking. You always sign in pencil. The reason for this is the same as the acid-free container to store your prints. You are signing in pencil so that in the future, should your paper become foxed or damaged in some way, much of that can be repaired by art conservators, but not if you have a kind of a mystery ballpoint pen or a felt tip pen here. They do a kind of a dry cleaning on paper. Dry meaning it's solvents, not water. Solvents, they evaporate very quickly, and that's why it's called dry. That's what you do with your woolens. If you take them to the dry cleaners, they're using what we would consider a liquid, but it's not water. Okay, sometimes it might be like a vapor, but solvents is what they would use to clean it, to get rid of that staining that it might have on it. And pencil remains the same. You can get it in the water. You can soak the paper. You can do lots of things, and the pencil will not change. And that is why you want to sign and number in pencil. Now, I say all of that, but I also say with equal fervor, it's up to the artist printmaker how they want to sign their work. This is a convention, and printmaking people will recognize it, and they'll know what it means, and they'll take it seriously, and they'll think you're taking it seriously. And there's a kind of cachet there. That's kind of nice. But ultimately, it's the artist's decision how to sign and with what to sign it. Okay, and a lot of this signing and numbering is about verifying value and authenticity. It's the monetization part of printmaking, and it's not my favorite part. So I'm a little skeptical of it, if you will. Okay, but let's continue. It's always the addition number, how many you have in addition, is always expressed as a fraction. I'm going to try to put it a little closer here. Closer but crooked. You'll see it's 1/4. So this 1/14. There were 14 in the addition, and this is an etching, but it's the same for relief printmaking or silk screen or any kind of printmaking. And so this number could be 2, could be 2 out of 14, it could be 14 out of 14, right? It follows consecutively. There is no relationship between the number 1, 2, 3, or 4 and the order in which they were printed. People do not keep track of that. I think at one time they did when they were printing plates to the point of their sort of disintegrating, but that is not the case in contemporary printmaking at all. Any number is just as valuable as any other number. There are some exceptions to value in printmaking, and it has to do with scarcity, just like anything. How many Beanie Babies are there in that particular shade? Well, there's only 12, so those are more valuable than the one that there's 2,000 of. And if you don't know what I'm talking about with Beanie Babies, that's because it's quite a dated reference to a collectible. Collectible in the sense of it being a toy. But anyway, be that as it may, the number is tells the people there were only 14, and it's sort of a contract that you've made with a purchaser. It means that you've destroyed the plate, and the typical way to destroy a plate is to with a relief plate, you would gouge a big line right across it, probably in an X, and it's called canceled. With a metal etching plate like this is, you would scrape a deep gouge into both sides. Many artists reuse their plates, and like by flipping them over or by biting this down in the case of an acid an etching, an intaglio plate, and you could reuse it, and it would be the same thing as canceling it. Okay, the center is where the title would go if there is one. This one is Mystery and Manners, and then the signature is always on the right-hand side underneath the corner there. You keep it pretty close. I actually made mine a little bit too deep here because typically your work would be matted and framed, and it would have a kind of a mat that would come like this, and it would drop down a little lower there so that they could include the signature. Although again, that's up to at the discretion of the purchaser. Some people might not want that. In fact, some artists don't want that there. I have some prints I'm going to show you where I didn't want, even though this is in pencil and pretty light, I still feel it's kind of competing with what's going on in the image, right? Because this is a reading mode, this is a looking mode. You know, I'm kind of asking you to do both. Maybe I don't want to always do that. So let's set that aside for a minute. Here we go. This one is 8 out of 12. Now, this one has no title. And this one actually, although it is my plate, it was printed by Leslie Sutcliffe, by a master printer for a project she was doing with artists. And so I was invited in to do the plate work, to do the imagery, and then she printed the edition for me. And this is 8 out of 12. And there's the signature. And I want to talk about this one because this has well, it's a funny little thing, a little detail that I don't really need to get into. But basically, this sort of velvety splodge of dark here is made by a different method than these splodges. And it's made by using a tool directly into the metal it's called dry point, and it wears down. It throws up a burr when you scrape at it, and the burr is sort of a raised edge, but it's very fragile. And after printing it 2 or 3 or maybe 4 times, it won't grab enough ink, and it starts to look pale, and you have to redo it. So that can make for a problem if you're trying to make exact duplicates. And we had some that weren't up to the standards of the BAT, which I should also talk about. So we'll talk about that next. I really don't know why this one is in the AP kit designation at this point, because they look pretty similar to me, but this one is definitely darker here and here. So this is one that Leslie, because she's the printmaker, so she made this decision, felt this wouldn't fit in the edition. It wasn't like enough. It wasn't identical enough to this one. But I liked it, and I designated it an artist's proof, an AP. That's what that designation means. And that's a great place to, if there's a couple of prints that you really like, but they don't really fit in the edition, you could designate them AP. You're supposed to technically not overuse the artist's proof designation. And can you tell why? In this case, it's pretty obvious, right? Everybody who buys one of these thinks there's only 12, but look at this artist proof that's so very nearly similar. Sometimes the artist proof will be on a different color of paper, like a trial proof, and that's real obvious, and it's not really a threat to the scarcity of the edition. This is another artist proof, and this one is really quite different. You'll see that this has become very worn out, and it's not dark enough. So I kept that one as an artist proof, but you would not be confused about it looking like part of the edition one, which is this one, right? It's very different. Okay. All right, so that's artist proof, a useful designation, and of course the numbers. And the BAT. So the way it works in a professional situation with printmaking is that you go to the printmaker as an artist, say, and you work on your plate until you're satisfied with it. You maybe make changes in color and paper, or maybe position even. And this is a two plate print. One plate has a kind of a yellowy, rusty color. The other plate has a blue gray, like I think it was a Payne's gray. And so you print one and then the other one right on top of it. But we made a couple in different colors before I decided what I liked, and those would be designated CTP, color trial proofs. Okay. Once the CTP would go right here, although what's here is an AP. And what you would do with once you found the color you liked, which is this one, you would mark that BAT or GTP. And BAT is the French for bon à tirer, and it means good to pull, and that's what the GTP stands for. So if you were your own printmaker artist, you might work on your plate till you were satisfied with it, work out the colors, work out the paper. Then you would print one and market that, although I never do. I just go, yeah, that's the one I'm shooting for. And then you'd start printing your edition, knowing that it had to look like this one. And ones that didn't, you'd be planning to either designate differently as artist proofs or destroy. Does that make sense? I hope so. So I don't usually make that BAT, but Leslie did because she's a real professional. She's a master printer. And so we came to the BAT, she made it, and then she made all of her subsequent impressions she matched that, if that makes sense. This is another AP. I don't know why I have so many APs. This is one I printed myself, and it's 4 out of 4. I make kind of small editions, and I still have overflowing flat files. But anyway, this is another 2-plate one, and I made a couple different color trial proofs on this one. It has no title, but there's my signature. There's the number. All right. Oh, this one does have a title. I'm sorry, I lied. This one is called Coruscate, and I didn't want the title on the front because I thought it was going to be kind of crowded there. And I also put the date on the back. So Coruscate is the title there. And you know, I, as the artist, can choose. I could have put all of this on the back, right? The signature, the number, everything could have been on the back if I didn't want it competing with the imagery there. Okay. Here's a great one right here. This is one of those ones. And this is a sort of an experimental plate that I created by shoving the plate with some force, a metal plate, a zinc plate, onto the asphalt and scratching it on the one side. But then I printed it 4 times, overlapping in 4 different colors, the cyan, the yellow, and the magenta, and the black of kind of traditional color printing. And so it's a kind of a little bit conceptual, and it's also every time I printed it, I used the colors in a different order. So there's really no addition, but there are states. So I felt these were related, and I didn't want them signed on the front because look how tiny that is. It would just be a mess putting that on there. So I titled it and signed it on the back, State 2, and that's because it's a state and not an addition, because there are 4 or 5 of them and they're related, but they're not identical, if that makes sense. So state proof is something, SP, that you might want to put on your print also. All right, let's look at this one. This is another one I didn't think should be signed on the front. It's 2 plates actually, side by side, printed together, and I have it signed artist proof and my name on the back. This is another state proof. I've made several plates where I'm working on like kind of erasure and addition, right? Like taking away and adding. And I would pull a proof to see if I had scraped out enough of these prints. I was trying to kind of like say something about time and movement by repeating the images, but also having them kind of disintegrate, if that makes sense. So there's lots of state proofs from this particular print, this plate, and there's also an addition. When I got to the end, I made a big addition of 14 or so. It was a class share project. But we can also notice that there's a pretty big difference between this one and this one, even though you can't really see it. What the big difference here is that, see how this is a lot more what they call plate tone. It's much darker in the background than this one. And so if I was doing this edition myself and these were identical, this would not be good enough, right? This wouldn't make my cut. And that's my choice. Many artist printmakers would say, yes, that is close enough. But I would find this one too much darker than that one. So these two couldn't be in an edition together. One of them maybe could be in addition. Does that mean in an edition? If that makes sense. It may not. Don't worry too much about it. Here's another one that I think I have 2 of. Yeah, here's an artist proof. I kept this one but didn't think it should be in the edition because I think this one's too light. See how it's really light here? And this one is in the edition, and it's a more even gray tone over here. Again, this one has the number here on the left, the signature on the right, and the title I preferred to put on the back. The title is Basket Boy. Basket Boy is right there. There you go. This is an unusual print for me because it has a lot of representational imagery in it. Well, so does the one before that. What am I saying? Okay, another print I wanted to show a little example of Sheen Calais here. And when you do something as radically different as this, right, you're actually into 2 different editions at this point. Although they're related really strongly because this plate is printed on that piece of an old book, a page from an old book. But because it's printed on there, it looks enough different from this that this one can be considered its own edition, and this is a separate edition. So this is 2 out of 2. There were only 2 like that, and this is 1 out of 3. Oh yeah, there's a title too. Parenthetically unwritten letter. And this one is untitled. Why did I want to show you these? There was something important about this. Oh, yes. So let's say you're making a relief print and you make a bunch that do have some chine collé, and you make another set that doesn't have any chine collé, but is the same plate. I would consider those 2 separate editions, right? I would also consider it gets a little weird if all you do is if you change the color, it can definitely be a different edition. If you only change the kind of paper it is, you're getting close to violating some of the protocols, right? But if you change both the ink color and the paper color, definitely fine to call it another edition. It's funny because you're kind of printmakers consider this information kind of a contract, right? A binding contract with the purchaser. Here's another one, 2 out of 2. I think I have another print of that. I don't know why that one's even in there. This is a trial proof. This was me checking out the print as I was going. And it's actually, I think it's really quite crooked on here. And probably this one should have just been torn apart. But at the time, I was thinking, yeah, I kind of like this blue one. I would like to keep it, so I'm going to designate it a trial proof. It's not part of an edition. Oh, and here's another one of these. Oh, and this is a good example of the differences in the state prints. Remember, I explained that I was printing these in a different position each time. Let's see. And I was inking it in a different color. So, or ink, no, not ink. I was inking it in different colors. I was layering the colors in different orders, and I was rotating them in different positions, if that makes sense. I'm not holding this up here at all. It's actually not looking like much on my monitor. I don't know why I'm trying to show you this, but this is why these are states and not an edition. You can see that these are really not at all identical. That's, I guess, my main point. Okay, great. Now, are there other designations you would want to use when you're editioning? There's another one on the list. There's a long list of initials that you could use, but you should stick with the more common ones. I believe. I think artist proof gets you a long way. I think signing and regular numbering, regular expressed as a fraction is very useful for editions. State proof is useful. Trial proof, maybe a little less. Color trial proof, CTP, that's pretty useful designation. One other one I have seen many times in museums is U.I. unique impression. And that means there's just one of those. And that really should mean there's just one of those. It shouldn't really be, although these look quite, hold on. Even though these look very different, it really probably wouldn't be Cricut for me to label these UI, right? They're just too related. Monoprints, monotypes, things that really look totally separate from everything else could be labeled unique impression. But then if it's a monotype or a monoprint, you're sort of suggesting there's only one or not, or one that's exactly like that. So you don't really need it. I think that's everything. Oh, the story. So I give this kind of a little lecture about signing and numbering every year, and I hand out that same handout that you have access to on your Canvas page. And I always say, this is what people do because it's conventional, but you should always do what feels best and right for you, just like tearing the paper. Tearing the paper, interestingly enough, is one I really love. I love that we tear the paper to make it match the decal of the handmade paper. To me, that's completely great. But the signing and numbering gets a little less appealing to me, although you can see that I've done it. So I had a student who had made a print, and she had hand colored it with a lot of watercolor, and she was entering it into a printmaking contest, and she signed it in ink. And I don't know if she didn't hear my lecture or she did hear my lecture and decided she wanted to sign it in ink. It doesn't really matter. The point is, she got this print to the jurors, and the jurors said they would not accept it and asked her to print it again, paint it again, and submit it again with a pencil signature. And I really thought that was kind of outrageous, because to me, the choice of the artist should have been the last word. And if the artist chose to sign it in ink, then that was how it should be. So I would say that, and I defended her, but they still made her give another one. So if you're going to enter a show, just sign a number in pencil in the conventional way, and increase your odds of getting in. But if you're not going to enter a show and you really want it in ink, just do it, All right, I think that's everything. Thank you for tuning in.